From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to SBI TV, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today we're going to explore how market-leading enablement groups are transforming the seller experience. I'm your host, Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI. Joining me today in the studio is Ray Oram, and Ray is the Global VP of Sales Enablement for a tiny little company you might know by the three names IBM. So, Ray, it's tempting for me to describe what IBM does because everybody has this sort of vision, but I thought instead of me doing it, because everybody thinks IBM, one of the most well-known brands in the world, I thought in welcoming you to the show, maybe you could tell us the way we should be thinking about IBM in 2019, because obviously a lot has changed. So first off, welcome to the show. And maybe as a way of getting started, you can tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us about, the current IBM.
Sure. Hi, great to be here, Matt.
Yeah.
Again, I, as you mentioned, have the privilege to lead what we've been doing a long time at IBM, but we haven't really formalized it as a professional discipline, and that's sort of my current mission.
Yeah.
But I've had a sundry of roles in communications and marketing and actually in sales.
Yep.
Started with the company many years ago as a programmer. So it's kind of ironic from the path we take,
Yeah.
But IBM is, as you said, it's big, it's well known. Very powerful brand, 100+ year legacy. And in the field that we're in, it's a company of reinvention and reestablishing itself time and time again. I'd say central to us has always been about helping clients, really deliver on progress. Mm-hmm. And we do that by innovative technology with deep industry expertise and a real understanding of how things work, and underlying that with trust and security. And so fundamentally, we are a cloud platform, cognitive enterprise, bringing the value of AI to businesses and cloud in all its forms.
Yep. That is the way that I think IBM wants people to think of them, as opposed to the old kind of blue suit, white shirt, red tie, and the buttoned-up provider that it used to be. And I think evolution is key. So if you're watching or listening out there, and you don't want to miss any of our weekly shows, and you want to access our content library, if you're an iPhone user, just download the SBI app via the Apple App Store. Search for Sales Benchmark Index, and then you can use the iPhone to get notifications, help you on your commute, while you're traveling, or even during a workout. So this concept of sales enablement, or as we like to refer to it at SBI, revenue enablement, it's been around for about 20 years. It's going through this identity crisis, as I like to say. So standard approaches to training and knowledge transfer, they're having a declining impact. Technology appears to be disrupting this core business function. And supporting today's seller is an increasingly difficult challenge. So if you think about that as the backdrop, that's where Ray and I are going to spend our time on the segments. In this first segment, we're going to talk about the seller experience. So traditionally, sales enablement group spends their time, Ray, they working on budgets, supporting sellers through training, right? Developing some digital assets and knowledge sharing. And these are often done through a series of events, right?
Yep.
But if you think about the seller experience, from getting ready for product launches to a new sales methodology, there's a series of them. So I guess from where you sit, how does the current pace of information and innovation impact how you enable and empower, to use your word, sellers?
Well, I think anyone in the business-to-business realm is very versed in the consumerization of our worlds, and the same is for our sellers as well. And at least, for our company, a larger portion of our portfolio is now in more of a as a service model. And that's not just a technology statement, but it's also in many verticals, a business design and model. And, traditionally we kind of lead everything that you do in enablement to the point of like the win or the big lead or the engagement that you get. And I always like to say that, you really start selling once you win. And so one of the key things is, do you have in place the continuous feedback system, both in terms of how your stuff is getting used and what people are thinking about it, because that drives a new requirement from an enablement strategy standpoint. And so thinking ahead, cross-sell and upsell, not as an afterthought, but it has to be sort of continuous and baked in. So data and the use of that real-time data and insight becomes really critical.
So then if I think about this challenge and executing on that challenge in a matrixed organization of the size of IBM, for those that are in large organizations, how do you deal with that?
Well, it could be one of those half full, half empty kind of moments.
Sure.
And there is a complexity, but it's somewhat by design, because it is sort of core to our value prop that it's really the combination of things brought together.
Yep.
But that's easier said than done. And really, fundamentally, the one way we're doing that is actually by having this formalized sales enablement discipline. And although we're quite federated across the business, but by us all working together as a practice with a shared agenda and purpose, we actually help become an integrating force in the company.
An integrating force. That's very good. All right. So this next segment, Ray and I are going to talk about the whole concept of what it takes to truly enable a seller. So if you think about complications and challenges of creating the right seller experiences and the need for enablement or empowerment groups to leverage the knowledge and skills of many other organizations inside the company, optimizing seller effectiveness can be tough. So Ray, describe, how do you gain in these federations? How do you gain some level of consensus and alignment to get to the right outcome for a seller?
It's really, I don't like to say I lead a guild, but we take sort of that sort of attitude to it, and in a way I'm facilitating. So, every other week we have HR leaders, communication leaders, marketing leaders, and then all the different unit and geography dimensions. And at a high level in the organization, we just focus on the things that is really going to help when the squads come together supporting a cohort of sellers by roles or types.
So you're doing so I just want to, that's really interesting. So maybe it's learning and development, HR, IT, et cetera, bringing those groups together on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to say, how are we supporting the organization?
Exactly. And we track to outcomes and projects. So a great example, we go through cycles and a recognition of we need content standards to kind of help bring an efficiency to our work and an effectiveness. And by co-creating with offering management and marketing and enablement, and we sort of share the standards and get to the workable model, that just helps downstream. So people aren't re-navigating or redoing the work. And so that's where we try to focus on where there are really big influence points to the work.
Something you mentioned to me when we were chatting before the show is this concept of seller empathy. What does that mean?
Well, it's, empathy is about understanding. And so if you are really about empowerment, there's a lot you could do readily to get a sense of what are sellers doing and what are they saying. You could observe that through data and all kinds of means. But, sellers by design are a little skeptical, so there's an aspect to, do you really get a sense of what they're thinking and what they're feeling? And to kind of get over skepticism, you can't skip the belief step. So how do you build the belief, which then inspires actions that you want to have in the organization? So things we've done to really just instill that into a bit of our enablement culture is, one thing I did early on was, in starting to look at this as a professional discipline, I said there's enablement specialists, and these are, real pros at a content or an education module or whatever it may be. But then we also have enablement strategists, and they really are more like campaigners. Like, they think of the cohort of sellers. They're just obsessed every morning when they wake up to say, are they responding? What are they looking at? What are they, and really getting into their head and representing their voice. So doing, feedback reviews formally and things like that. But it's having that combination, because they have to feed each other. And that's what we've really tried to do, to kind of bring that empathy thinking into all of the work by actually defining it as part of a role.
Okay. So then how do you change the means of delivery for enablement if you think about transitioning and reshaping the role?
So just to carry off from that, so if you start to put more design thinking into the work that you're doing, so I mentioned before about, content standards, but we also started to look at, our common content delivery. And by, doing the right kind of deep dive experiential work with sellers as users, but doing it in concert with data analytics people and marketing people, we start to uncover things like, yes, they want to find things, but actually the bigger value is the currency of information.
Makes sense.
So then that factors into what we do in our selections.
Okay. Very good. All right. So this segment, Ray and I are going to talk about the enablement engine. So we've discussed the seller experience, what's facing them, what they need. We've discussed the culture of enablement. That's critical to be able to create the right seller empowerment. So now we're going to discuss the mechanics of enablement. So Ray, if you think about a specific enablement process, maybe different from maybe common industry practice, talk a little bit about that and share your point of view.
Yeah, I would say, I'm not exactly sure whether it's unique or not, but it was a deliberate choice that we're making at the stage that we're at.
Okay.
Often there's a rush to go to structure and an organizational design. And when we formed the discipline, we were very deliberate to say we really want to remain federated. So it's okay if some enablers are in marketing, and some are in sales, and some are in HR, and some are even in communications. But if we really focus on what these people do and support them as a practice and community, it actually works. And it actually helps us then bring all these parties together somewhat organically.
Sure. And
structure may change after the fact, but by focusing more on the skills needed and the competencies, we're seeing that as, whether it's unique, but it's giving us an advantage and it's a deliberate choice that we made.
Got it. So then if you think about some enablement teams have former sellers, people who were quota carriers, but maybe they're better at being more of an architect working across multiple people. They were a good rep, not a great rep or an average rep, but they sort of end up in that role. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think enablement sometimes gets a bad rep for thinking, well, this is the place where, sellers go in their final years or when they don't have anything better to do or something like that. And to me, it's not so much because I really value working knowledge of selling. That's critical to what we're doing. Yep. But what we're trying to do in terms of as we look for the talent and profile for sales enablement, it starts to work in some different characteristics or behaviors. So as we were talking a lot about, design thinking, but do you really have the empathy of a designer? Do you problem solve in that way? Are you really campaign minded? So the ideal person is, part activist, part favorite teacher, part conductor in an orchestra. So there's so much about orchestration and sort of that love of data and using it in a campaign mindset. Yeah. And then underlying it is actually, in use of insights and data to get to standards, what does good look like? And so it's those characteristics, which could be drawn from great sellers, have some of those attributes. Yep. But, we look at consulting, we look at communications, we look at educators. And so it's really sharpening those kind of muscles and skills is what we're trying to do as we develop the discipline.
Okay, so then my last question on this piece was around, I guess, data and insights and the tools that you use to deliver actionable insight. If I'm a seller, right, and I think back to my quota carrier days way back when, I want to get something that helps me make a better decision to drive sales cycle length, win rates, right, and deal size.
Yeah,
that's what I care about. Can I win more? Can I win faster? And can I win them for more revenue, higher ASP? So, how does a seller, in your opinion, leverage data, and what sort of tools do you provide them?
Well, of course, being at IBM, we are not hurting for aspects of technology and tools. And if anything,
think you'd be leading the charge.
And if anything, our challenge is, it could be easy to wake up and what we have 100 different tools in the business development realm, and so it is these cycles of well, how do we bring things together? So you leverage, technologies like APIs so that you can have data feed and you get very agile in the development of these things. But what becomes really valued is, at the end of the day, people have to get smart about what we can offer the client and pair that with getting a lot smarter about the client. And there's a lot more data sources available, including their interactions with marketing programs, and having the ability to bridge what you're doing with skills and with marketing and have that come together is really powerful. And then another big data point for us is we talked a bit about like NPS and Net Promoter Score, baking that into our tools and into our content so we have more of a system to know what's getting used, what's working, what's not, which brings a better efficiency and effectiveness to our work.
Wonderful. So Ray, super helpful. And appreciate everything you shared with the audience and obviously with me as well. So thanks for coming by.
Great, pleasure.
All right, everybody. Good insights from Ray. Hopefully this allows you to reframe how you think about enablement versus empowerment, right? And this cross-functional group that is making the seller experience that much better. So as always, I want to thank the SBI audience for tuning in. I appreciate your continued support. You have a choice on where you put your eyes and your ears, and the fact that you'd spend some time with us means a great deal to myself and my team. As always, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.